Oh, there you are. I was hoping you'd make it. Come in, sit down. Welcome to the Story Well. If you've found your way here, then here is where you belong. Joining me at the table is Mr. Christopher Soucy.
Howdy.
Hey, thank you for coming along. I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
So I know that you set yourself some very ambitious writing goals.
Oh, yes,
in 2023.
Well, and it's funny. It all started in 2020, where I was going to write a feature length or full length every week.
That's insane.
That was my 2020. 2021 was spent revising the scripts that I wrote in 2020. And then 2022 was about kind of like marketing, like trying to figure out how to get scripts into different hands and kind of figure out what the world of writing is like. Last year, I did something called From Concept to Submission, which means every month I would try to write a feature length, either screenplay or play, and then submit it to places that it was appropriate for. Again, contests, or there are theater companies that open for submissions. There are producers that sometimes do open calls. So these kinds of things. And it was really just trying to learn aspects of the business that I've always been I'll write it, I'll produce it. So I was always a writer out of necessity more than anything else. It's like, oh, there's a hole in the season. We'll fill it. We don't have money. I'll write it. And that kind of becomes the art of the write became secondary to the obligation to deliver. So I've just been really practicing being a writer. Thanks to the pandemic, I've learned that the beauty of writing is it's the weight that's on your shoulder is solely on your shoulder. Mm-hmm. Whereas the wider your production and the wider the things that you're involved in, you're sharing a burden, which is nice, but you're also risking the misstep that could hurt someone else or to throw something else off. When you're just trying on your own, if you fall, then you're the only one who conceivably could be hurt. When you're working with a large group and you fall, you conceivably can hurt the whole group. And I had never felt the pressure of that until I was doing things on my own and I felt all this relief. I was, there's nowhere near as much anxiety when I'm sitting writing and submitting. And if I get a rejection letter, I'm like, whew. Okay. It's not the same as like getting 20 people on stage and having no one in the audience. That's a totally,
I've been there.
That's a totally different sensation where it's like, God, I've let so many people down in this regard. So my writer's journey of late has been to learn how to do the mechanics of it. Because I can write all day long. I can't sell. I'm not good at that. I can't market. I'm not good at that. So I have to learn those skills.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I was even in marketing for a while and then realized how little I knew of how this world works.
Yeah, product and service marketing is so easy to kind of get your mind around because the product...
You have a widget.
Yes, exactly.
Here's what my widget does. Here's how it'll improve your life.
Right. And what we create creatively is subjective. So you are now trying to convince somebody else to see it from the subjective point of view.
Right. We're not selling buildings. We're selling blueprints.
Right. Exactly. And it's like, oh, gosh, I don't know who wants this. Who is it that wants this? And then the lesson, of course, was that doesn't matter. I had mentioned before, satisfy yourself first with your creation.
Right.
And then present it as the art that it is. And the people who come will be the people who are drawn to what you've created rather than going out and pushing it down people's throats.
Right. Right. Because you also don't want to be that guy. Yeah. You want to be the one
the door-to-door Shakespeare. Prithee, I've arrived at your home. It's like, slam.
Now stand there. I have a series of wigs. Yeah, I think there also is a different set of muscles you stretch when you know you're not going to be the one producing this.
Oh, absolutely. And I had to break myself of this. That 2020 of writing was breaking myself of writing for the producer mind. The producer mind says, I can't afford that.
Right.
Stay in one location. Don't have multiple scenes. No weird costumes, no weird props, because you get into that habit of being like, okay, this takes place in a living room and everybody's modern day and that's it. This is how this story is going to go. And a lot of that is just practical. because you don't have a costume budget. You don't have a prop budget. Can't rely on coming up with these things, especially when you're writing to fill a hole of a overproduced season and there's no money left over. So there's something wonderful.
What do I do with a bare bulb and 2 chairs?
Right, exactly. It's an interrogation scene.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So I guess what have you learned then? Like that as you're trying to think, like what are the sort of the lessons you've picked up? I mean, and this doesn't have to be your final dissertation.
Oh no,
like
the first thing is
over that year now that we're sort of have just crossed into a new year.
The first thing
what was lessons
is that the writing is a relatively small part of the process, because after the writing comes the selling or the searching or finding the home for what you've written. And so fascinatingly enough, I've learned that once you have product in hand, the pegs that it fits become much more apparent as you go searching. So like you're looking for submission opportunities, right? And luckily, many, or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, many submission opportunities tell you very quickly that they're only interested in X, Y, and Z. And so you start to learn what to avoid. It's like, well, I am not a Black lesbian living in Southern California. And that's what they're looking for in playwrights. So I know that's not where I'm going. I didn't write a environmental piece. I know that's not it. So you kind of get into this place where you're realizing that there are theaters that cater to your taste.
Yeah.
They only produce the kinds of things you write. And that's what I'm learning. I'm learning to map out where in the country those people are who regularly create the kind of content I create. And that takes a lot of burden off of you, but it does take time to learn. You do have to do that work, that leg work of associating yourself with other writers or other creators who work in the same genre or same field or create similar things.
Yeah. Because
their success is the template of your success.
Right.
Because the audience that they have found are your audience. And that's another thing is it's far more collaborative than I ever thought it would be. I've become member of multiple writing groups and they're so supportive. Because you would think that ego of, competition. Oh no. But instead they're like, oh, you write just like so-and-so. You should go talk to so-and-so. This is incredible. Oh, you have the same feel as so-and-so, which at a younger age probably would have annoyed me. Yeah. At a younger age, I probably would. I am myself. I write like no one writes like me. I'm special in every way. But then to learn, no, what they're really saying is there's a call for what you do.
Oh, yeah.
What they're really
that's
saying
a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's not that you write similar to somebody else. It's that the material that you write has found purchase somewhere, has served someone. That means you're on the right track. It means that, and you want to be on the track that those people are on. You want to find those people and associate with them. And because they're, again, surprisingly supportive. With wondrous achievements, they're still very humble and they're still very quick to be like, oh yeah, I'll give you this. I think in this entire time, I've only run into 1 or 2 people that I didn't jive with. I wouldn't even say that. It's just that we weren't on the same page.
Yes.
And other than that, I reach out to other creatives, especially creatives who are doing something similar.
Yeah. One of my friends became friends because I was such a huge admirer of her work. Like she had done a play that absolutely blew me away. I was like, I could not be more of a target audience than this. And then got a chance to say that and then have now become friends because of that too. I don't think our styles are that similar, but at the same time, I respect her opinion almost more than anybody else for that exact thing. And technically we're in competition because I mean, there's only so many theaters. There's only so many, especially like in the same city, but I never really feel that way.
No,
I have walked out on awards to friends and have been like, all right.
Right. And that's another thing is it's amazing because when you get into a certain pattern of it, you celebrate with other people's triumphs.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to know them and you're starting to work in the same field. It's like every now and then you might hear sour grapes from someone, but the vast majority of people are like, great, congratulations, because every victory for a writer is in your realm. It means that you are in the company of people who are finding success. And we should celebrate. We should always celebrate when somebody's like, I'm getting produced, or I won this contest, or anything like that. Even if you went against them and lost out, that doesn't preclude your ability to say, great job. So awesome for you.
Yeah, I joined a screenwriting group when I first sort of moved out to Phoenix, and they do a live read thing where they have a bunch of actors come in. So it's like a jam session almost. Like you come in and they rent out a space, like a bar or a comedy club or whatever, and then they just randomly assign actors to whatever roles, and then you have actors, like professional actors in the Valley. So you get to see a bunch of actors. Like I picked up a bunch of actors from there, like put them in my pocket. I'm like, I'm gonna call you someday. And I have multiple ones I have. And then you get to see a lot of people's writing up and then performed, and then you get feedback. So that was a huge lesson for me in not only that, but also how to take feedback, because some people are not very good at it. And I was like, oh, this is a talent. This is absolutely a skill, I should say.
Oh, absolutely. And you learn with feedback how much of the individual is dictating their perception. Because I went to one that had multiple plays in it, but there was one person whose feedback was always very much in the realm of, well, you just hate women. Well, you just hate women. And it was like, I'm not going to argue that point.
Right.
But it's interesting to me that across the board, you couldn't find a single playwright that liked women, which kind of suggests maybe there's something personally going on. Yeah, because the first couple, it's like, whoa, that was rough. I didn't even see that. I didn't even notice. But because ultimately, every critique was valid.
Yeah.
But it all was colored with that particular color. And after a while, you're just like, okay, yeah, I see it. But now I think you're just looking for it.
Yeah.
It's that classic, George Lucas hates women. Look at Star Wars. That's not the Bletchell test. That's not going to work. Yeah. And I was like, maybe
he's just bad at that part.
Maybe he just doesn't have the comprehensive, not to mention stories of that ilk and of that time.
Yeah.
Weren't well known for presenting.
We remember Flash Gordon.
Right.
Like that. We don't remember anyone else for the rest of the thing. There was no strong female lead. It was,
when
Tarzan, Sherlock Holmes, like all these things, all these classic characters.
Right.
I'm thinking of like the serials that
he was actually trying to replicate it was also a very sexist time in Hollywood. So the criticism is not wrong. Right. It's just sort of an after effect, really.
Yes, I've had this conversation with my 16-year-old because I show her stuff from different eras, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to show you, like, there's some stuff in here, but what you have to understand is by the time of the era, and not even showing her like Gone with the Wind or whatever, but like even stuff from the 80s.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
there was like, was it Soul Man?
Soul Man.
Yeah.
What a nightmare when you think about it.
Like I'm like, no, this was mainstream entertainment.
Yeah, it was.
This was.
These were A-listers doing
multiplexes across the country. You don't understand, like, just to give you an idea of like how far we've come and how far we have to go. Just to let you know, say, I didn't actually show her those things, but I was.
But Soul Man is a great example of they really thought they were doing something. They thought, and like, in many ways,
we're going to talk about race in a way that no one has.
They kind of did. What they succeeded at, which in retrospect is horrifying, was raising a conversation of the period of the time.
Yes.
Which was also weird because it was kind of a rom-com, making it even more so we're laughing at this. So now it's funny to watch a white person in a black person's shoes go through this kind of nonsense. But and it's funny because Soul Man does not come up as often as it should when people rail against blackface.
Yes. I mean, like you go from that to, I recently rewatched a lot of Night Court, like the new one has come out, but like the last one, and like the amount of transphobia in that show I was like, wow, I had not, like, there's so many punchlines are guy in a dress, like all like constant.
Well,
like every 3 or 4 episodes, I was like, wow, I forgot how much of a easy punching bag that was back then. And so I was then like saying when I didn't show it that to her, but as we were talking about some of those things, it's sort of now becoming like 2024 eyes saying there's a whole Like I said, kid, you don't understand. There's a whole thing of movies of men dressing as women. And the gay panic that goes along with that, like from Joanna Man to Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, all this. I'm like, you understand? Like, this was a genre. This was a style of film that was.
Well, it's a style of comedy,
right? Yeah,
it branches. Milton Berle famously did drag for Last Flip Wilson. Famously, even Medea.
Edna.
Because people don't really talk about Medea as a trans phobic icon because it comes down to this weird sort of place where the comedy is not unsound. It's not the insensitivity is a retrospect effect, but the comedy of a man dressed as a woman trying to indicate the disparity between the two was such a part of the comedy shtick that as we grew into awareness that it was hurtful, it was like, oh gosh, that's so strange because you can't assert that anyone was thinking, I'm going to take him down a peg. Or even suggesting that there was anything other than this man is pretending to be a woman for the comedy effect.
Right.
And you're like, but where do we start drawing the lines? At what point? Because you're right. The joke in so many of those is how ludicrously homophobic even the notion, because you almost always have the situation where some man is attracted to the man pretending to be a woman, and that's supposed to be the comic point. What's so funny about that again?
Yeah,
it's like Charles Durning trying to sleep with Dustin Hoffman and Tootsie, being this huge bit, or having Dustin Hoffman's character as a woman sitting in a dressing room with a naked Gina Davis. Being he's getting an eyeful. It's also a crime at this point.
Right. I think I remember where that conversation started with her is that for Christmas I got the new Criterion Blu-ray of Some Like It Hot.
Oh, sure.
Which is the same is men dress as women. Like that is a thing. And obviously there's a Broadway show. It's just closing now.
Yes.
But is surprisingly progressive, especially for a movie from the 1940s.
That the last line almost redeems so much of the comedy, the Nobody's Perfect line.
Yeah.
That's a self-awareness that you don't expect from that period.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it could have been progressive thinking, or it could have just been like, well, that's a good line. Well, which as writers, you get to a point where you're like, I don't know what the deeper thing is, but that's a good line.
That's just it. The fact that it is a good line suggests a certain progressive thinking.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. But is it funny? For what reason? Yeah. Because it defies expectations. Which means you understand what the expectation is, which means that because that's all humor is, defying expectations. That's why a man dressed up like a woman was funny for so long, because it defies expectations. Right. But when we live in a world where the expectation is we are not defined by our gender, all of a sudden any humor that was derived from that becomes a question. It becomes well, then what's the humor? Is the humor simply that man is dressed like a woman? Again, I guess calling back to Medea, because Medea is a fully formed character and embodying a fully formed character. And then you're like, well, again, that notion of humor raises questions. Big Mama's House, Medea, back to Flip Wilson, really.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because it's all character.
Jamie Foxx. Was Jamie Foxx's character on In Living Color?
Oh, right. I don't remember the name, but
I don't remember either. But that was another. I mean, just another.
But it was a fully realized character.
Yes,
because the joke in Medea and is not that it's a man dressed as a woman. I mean, that's the humor.
That's Big Mama's House,
right? That's Big Mama's House, or Miss Doubtfire.
Or Mrs. Doubtfire, right? Yeah, because we know we're in on it.
Right, we're in on it. But in Jamie Foxx's case, it was how uncommon a human being you're looking at. Right? How strange it would be to encounter this person. Yeah. And this person is not a man dressed as a woman, but a very unfortunately proportioned woman.
Right. I guess. I mean, this is not at all where I expected to go.
Yeah, I don't know how we got here, but all right.
It's not at all where I expected to go, but this is fantastic. I don't want to weirdly transition out, but at the same time, would you have a take on if someone came to you and said, we want to do 12 episodes of Bosom Buddies?
Right.
So Bosom Buddies for the younger was a show from the 80s starring a young Tom Hanks.
That's where Tom Hanks came from,
the premise was he and the late great Peter Scolari could not get an apartment, and the only place they found was a one for women only, so they dressed as women so they could live in this place. It was not pervy in the way of like Porky's was or something, where it's like that idea. But it was they were
played on that notion a lot.
They did, of course, because they were still horny. They were still
they were red-blooded heterosexual men. Because they also played their twin brothers, or so all the women knew them as men. And
date the women that they were friends with as when they were.
So I think the very first thing I don't want
to put you on the spot.
No. The first thing I would say to any producer is, why would you do this?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be my very first inclination is, what are you trying to achieve with this specifically? Are you hoping to tap into some kind of market that I'm not aware of? Are you doubling down on old tropes, or is this going to be about the fluidity? Because I would say that one way to approach it is that to have characters decide to defy the rules of an all gender-based place by dressing up as the other gender and basically sticking it to the man, basically saying you have no right to disregard me based on a gender perception.
Yeah.
A more progressive take on it would be not that they are necessarily trans in their identity as much as they are fighting the establishment that allows for gender discrimination. And in that right, I would probably have it be women dressing as men.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was actually just trying to rack my brain about the few times, because that has come up in Hollywood a couple of times. Just One of the Guys.
Just One of the Guys was a big one.
There was an Amanda movie in the 90s.
She's the Man.
She's the Man. There it is. I know it's a version of 12th Night.
12th Night. That's right. Well, and that's just it. The common trope of that, going back to Shakespeare, is, you know what? This has always been a part of our consciousness. That there is an entertainment value to the mistaken identity, and to go over the board with the mistaken identity extending into gender. It has always been a thing. But of course, with Shakespeare, a lot of people don't take into consideration that Shakespeare had a cadre of actors who played women.
Right.
There were men who played women. And there was a point at which their ability to continue to play women was coming to an end.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden there are characters who are women playing men. It's like, probably to accommodate these actors who are not yet fully men characters, but can affect the bridge between being a man and a woman.
Yeah. So then you would have been at the Globe watching Olivia being performed by a man.
Yes. Just as a woman, dressed as a man.
Playing a man.
That's correct.
and I say we don't give enough credit to audiences from even back then of we accept this.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, because if you ever want to get a big ooh out of really young kids in school, you tell them Juliet was played by a man. Yeah. You know, Romeo and Juliet, those were two male actors. And the ooh is so fascinating because that gender awareness, and I'm hoping that it's changing as we speak, but that gender awareness goes all the way to the root. Just this knowledge of boys, girls, and things of that nature are so fundamental that you can really break a child's mind. Because even if they accept homosexuality, and even if they accept these things as the norms, to subvert their idea of this romantic classic couple, it introduces a new paradigm to them, one that they can fully accept, but also it elicits a response. They're like, oh, because they're just surprised that was the case. And it's so weird that our societal norms create these borders, and it takes time to kind of unlearn them. My kid is trans, and in that conversation has been an evolution of thought because it was, are you trans man, which was originally a concept, and then it's non-binary, which is another discussion entirely, but it was trending towards male, and so you find yourself in an analogous state, and being a writer, it's very weird to try to find the right words and right verbalization. We're living in the Wild West. I think that this is a period of time that we have to go through to get to the gender equality that we crave.
Right.
It's going to take time to get to a place where we're not using gender either way, in any way, to identify people's individuality, it's just it's going to be a growth period that we're going to have
absolutely.
to adjust to.
And I think that even, and just to sort of get back to writing,
Right.
I'm loving the conversation, but to transition back into what we were talking about is that it opens up a huge amount of possibilities for characters.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It used to be the sort of what would Die Hard be if it was a woman? I was like, yeah, but like you don't understand. Like so many of the old story tropes can be absolutely upended by changing all of these things around.
Yeah.
And when jealousy isn't a factor,
yeah, absolutely.
then how does Othello play? If it's just, oh yeah, well, Desdemona likes to sleep around. What are you going to do? Okay. All of a sudden I know that is what the story is about, but once you remove some of those boundaries, I think it opens up storytelling as opposed to
what you learn is
limiting it.
Especially as a writer right now, I think is not because there's always going to be a need for boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy finds girl.
Sure.
That's always going to exist.
Yeah.
But what I found is if the story doesn't revolve around their genitalia,
right,
there is no there's no gender to worry about. I find many of my characters, it would not change anything necessarily. It would change the way it's played and probably perceived, but storytelling wise, their function in the story can be justified by either gender. And I think that that's saying something because honestly, if John McClane were Jane McClane,
right,
it would still be a thrilling story.
Sure.
It would still, there's nothing that John McClane does that's masculine when you think about it.
Yeah.
We assigned it masculinity, shooting guns, and running around.
Right.
But,
yeah, exactly.
This finger, it works on either gender. It's just a thing. And it might even be more compelling to think about one female identifying character running through the ducts and killing a bunch of terrorists. We've definitely gotten to a place where it's like we've coded characters by gender as they should be coded by their actions. And the question is, are those actions achievable by any gender? Right. And 9 times out of 10, they are.
Yeah. There also is something about when you just switch he to she in terms on the script page.
Yes.
It doesn't.
No, it does not. No. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
you have to be aware.
In Alien, basically Ripley was written as a man and they didn't change anything. And it absolutely works. But on the stuff that I would say like Atomic Blonde, where you try and just make it Jane Wick.
Right.
It doesn't really, because it's like the tropes of Bond, I guess, more than anything else. I mean, because that's essentially what Atomic Blonde was. I didn't think it worked because you just tried to make it, what if James Bond was a girl? And that's where you stopped.
Right. You didn't take into consideration the implication. However, again, a character's
action-wise, it works.
Right.
But there's something fundamentally that this doesn't, like the James Bond tropes don't quite line up right.
And I don't, well, with that is specifically Atomic Blonde, as if it were just dedicated to this action, it's trying to shoehorn any awareness of it. It makes it difficult because ultimately it just didn't have a good plot.
Right.
And that
is the same tropes we've seen 100 times before and just changing the gender.
Because if it was a male, it would be equally disappointing.
Forgettable.
Yeah, equally forgettable. I don't even remember what the thing was. What was the thing? What were you after? I don't know.
Right.
All I really remember is there was an ice tub. That's all I got.
That's right. There's a long there's sometimes where you're like, man, that action went on forever. And then sometimes you're like, man, that action scene went on forever.
Right. It's like there comes a point where you're like, unless I care about the reason for the action can be as stellar as you want it. And somewhere along the way, writers have diverged into Michael Bay action, but then the action isn't commiserate with the story. It's like this story is far too heavy for the type of action that you've chose. So somewhere in the middle there, because it's like the John Wick formula. In the first John Wick, everyone was on board. Killed the dog, everyone dies, and you didn't. So when you started adding to that mythology, you're really messing with a perfect formula. The formula was everybody knows why everyone has to die.
Yeah.
And the second one was, I kind of know why everyone has to die. And the third one was Halle Berry has dogs. And then
That's exactly right.
And then we come around to the fourth one, which is just
epic finale.
A bunch of action sequences. It was just like so many action sequences that I forgot that there was a point.
Right.
Like there came a point where I was like, "Oh, right, Pennywise wants to kill him."
At some point, that one of the things I'm actually thinking about lately that I don't have fully formed thesis on this yet, but there's something about the stoic action hero that doesn't quite work if you're not at a certain level of acting, and that's or actually what I'm learning now is sort of like the way it's directed. And it's like a thing. A lot of people can convey a lot with their face, and a lot of actors can't.
Very true.
For a lot of, I love Keanu Reeves. I have nothing against Keanu Reeves, and he's doing fantastic. Those movies did fantastic. But there's a certain point where into John Wick 2 and 3 where I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Why did we go to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
It's like what are we doing?
What is your plan?
Right.
The strong silent type words, but why did you get your finger cut off? I mean, it sort of loses me a little bit. But then when you get to 4, where you're sort of like the last stand of the gunslinger, I'm like, okay, I get this.
Well, he went back to being silent.
Yeah, where it's like, I understand. You're going to your last duel. This is what the movie's leading up to. Okay, I understand.
John Wick should not have had more than 5 lines in all 4 movies. Right?
Yeah.
He should not have ever had to explain himself. He should not have ever had to say anything. He's Baba Yaga. He's a boogeyman. Yeah. He's a monster. And no disrespect to Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's doing fine.
The more he talked, the less intriguing the character was. The more we saw of the world of the continental assassin world, the less intriguing he was, because he became commonplace. Yeah, it was like, I didn't realize there were like 50 John Wicks out there. Right. I didn't realize that you could get John Wick with 2 dogs and it's a woman, and I didn't know that we could get Common in there as a John Wick, and Donnie Yen is the blind John Wick, which I would have watched the blind John Wick movie. Yeah. Yeah, I know. When it got to the point where even the characters in the movie were John Wick fans. Right. It was like, how far have we come? We've crossed into something here where they're just like, man, big fan, blah, 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 blah. Right. We need, somebody needs quality control on these movies. Somebody needs to be like, you know what? The mythology has gotten out of hand. And that's the truth of most sequels. Most times you expand or extend a story. Is that you have, because the more explanation you have of something, the less freedom the audience has to wonder and to come to. I always say this about the Indiana Jones franchise. Mm-hmm. I would think, in my estimation, Raiders of the Lost Ark would be the greatest movie ever made, if not for the sequels. If those sequels didn't exist, Raiders of the Lost Ark would always be my go-to answer as the best film ever. Yeah, because it was so perfectly paced, so perfectly put. Yes. Everything was done. The set pieces were amazing. The look was incredible. But with every other Indiana Jones iteration, we learned more about Indiana Jones, which made the character watered down just a little. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love Indiana Jones. I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. Right. But I find that each time we go out with Indiana Jones, he becomes a little more goofy. Yeah. So we're losing that edge that he had in Raiders. And then you get to, don't call it a snake and stuff too. And it's okay. You don't have to just reference back to the. Right. You don't have to continuously explain why he is the way he is. Every time you show me more about his life, the less I have to imagine, the less I have to work with as, I love that character. Do you? Because now pretty much in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, I know the first 20 years of his life. I now know too much about Indiana Jones. That was my main problem with Last Crusade is I was thinking of it as Henry Jones Jr.'s Big Afternoon. It was like, wow, in like 6 hours, all the things that made you into the person we know happened. That's amazing. Yes, that was so bizarre. Not to mention, in one day, I will never forgive everything that formed about your character. I will never forgive George Lucas, and I guess to a lesser degree Steven Spielberg, for what they did to Marcus Brody. Because Marcus Brody was a badass. He was a badass in that first movie. He was on top of it. He knew all the answers. He knew answers before Indiana Jones had the answers. And he was like, if I were your age, I'd be going after it. And I was like, yeah, I want to see Marcus Brody movies. And then in the third movie, they turned him into a blithering idiot. like
lost in his own
museum. I was like, no. I think that speech that Indiana Jones gave about he knows 1,000 languages, he'll disappear in the crowd. I would love to see that happen.
Yeah.
I think it would be far more interesting if Marcus Brody was that much of a badass, ran the Nazis in a loop, and then got caught through some other circumstance other than being an idiot.
Yeah.
I do not.
Yeah. That basically, out of his goodwill, Nazis shoot and a kid gets clipped in the arm or whatever too. And that's what
they drag children down the street and hold guns on them and say, if you don't come out, we're going to execute these children.
And then like from the crowd, steps out and takes off his,
yeah, exactly. How badass would that be?
Like he was there, like he was like just to the left of one of the guys.
I want my Raiders Marcus Brody. I want the Brody that we were promised in Raiders. But this is such a side tangent.
I know. It's been a freewheeling conversation. I love it. So let's keep the imagination going. Let's make up a story. Okay. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Let's say first start out with, basically there's no wrong answers. It's just going to be sort of how we want things to go. First of all, do you want to pick a format first? Do you not want to pick a format at all, or do you want to let the dice decide? Because I have a dice table for this.
I'm all about dice. I'm all about dice because
I borrowed my wife's dice because I couldn't track mine down, and they were rolling hot today. Okay. So basically the thing is I have the formats are I'm using a 6-sided die. So it goes from 1 to 6: book, TV, audio drama, film, play, or wild card. So basically that means you get to pick whichever one you want. So I'm going to roll, and we'll see what we got. Anything you were interested in most that's jumping out to you?
I'm kind of excited by any of them, really.
Okay, I've rolled a 5, so it is going to be a play.
Excellent stage play.
Stage play could be a musical, like it could be anything along those ways. Okay, then the second question is genres. I have a genre table, or we can just start talking about stuff, and then we can see what comes up. Do you want to pick first? Do you want to pick a genre? Nope. And then secondly. Nope, no genre.
Roll the dice.
Okay, roll the dice. Now, the next question is: do you want to just do one, or do you want to do 2 genres? So it is I'm
a fan of double genre. I'm a fan of mixed genre.
Okay, so I will roll one at a time. I got a nice 20-sided die here. We rolled an 8, so that is a rom-com.
Excellent.
Mixed with is that a 1? That's a 1. A historical fiction. So it's a historical fiction rom-com play.
Loving it already. Coming together.
All right. So we have that set. All right. So I'm going to be using the story engine for this. So the story engine is a set of cards you can use to help create stuff. You can find more at storyenginedeck.com. They are not a sponsor, but I would happily take their money because what they do is amazing. So I'm going to put this down. So we are going to have our agent. We're going to have our engine. We are going to have our anchor.
And so these are all individual cards?
These are all individual cards, yes, and I will read them off to you. And then
engine,
we can
anchor, and
let's see, this is the conflict, and then we have an aspect. So the aspect will add detail to a card. So I guess we're going to say all right, and then we each have a swap, so we can rotate. So each card rotates around. So like the character card will have 4 different archetypes on it, and then they have 2 different ones for like motivation, and then 4 different locations, and then sort of like for the anchor at the end. So right now, what we have is a vindictive enforcer. Wow, how appropriate with the John Wick conversation we just had. Wants to find redemption in/for a forest, but they will bear the scars for all to see.
So really, it all boiled down to the forest for me because of all the things to anchor something to.
Yeah.
I feel like the forest, and as far as enforcers go, and forest in my mind with a historical context, got to go with Little John of Robin Hood.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So Sherwood Forest
of the story of Little John.
Well, and the interesting thing is that a lot of people don't know this because I talk about it every now and then and people are like, what? A lot of people don't know that the Sheriff of Nottingham won. Like, no one knows this. The Sheriff of Nottingham actually poisoned Robin Hood while Robin Hood was in jail. And famously, Little John had to hold Robin Hood up so he could shoot an arrow out the window. And he was like, wherever the arrow lands, bury me there.
Huh.
And so that's the story of Robin Locksley's grave, is that he shot an arrow out of the tower.
Yeah.
And where it landed, they buried him.
Okay. Oh, so we could. That's a great place to
sets up
start.
the vengeance. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You can start literally with Little John at the arrow.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. That's so good.
Yeah.
That is so good.
The interesting thing too is building a relationship. Because it's a rom-com.
Yeah.
Which it's a pretty heavy duty start to a rom-com.
Sure.
But the fact is, Maid Marian.
Yeah.
Recently single.
Wow. Yes, that's true.
But trauma bonded. The trauma bonding of Maid Marian and Little John in a way that makes them so resistant to the idea of pursuing any kind of romantic love.
Yeah.
Allows for a lot of hijinks, allows for a lot of longing looks. Because if I really wanted to like tweak it, I would have them, maybe Little John and Maid Marian were having a along.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's good because that plays against sort of the King Arthur Lancelot thing. So they're it's a little bit more interesting because they have that guilt. But now there's nothing. So it's like
Lancelot and Guinevere if Arthur died.
Yeah. It would be interesting to have it be that Maid Marian is you just call her Marian. Yeah. Is the one who really wants revenge.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And I mean, John's sort of like, maybe we should just
he's so powerful. How do we stand up against that? He killed Robin Hood. And
I'm not Robin Hood. I like Robin Hood can set up to him. How can I? Little John.
Exactly. That's your perfect arc is getting to that place. And I think what might stand as the best vengeance of all is having everyone believe that Robin Hood won.
Oh, yeah.
Stealing the victory from the sheriff by continuing Robin Hood's antics and everyone talking about Robin Hood. And it's like, no, I killed him. He's dead. I won. It's like, no, the people still rally behind Robin Hood. Yeah. The people still believe in Robin Hood.
Yeah. That would be really some nice grist to the mill is how do you make someone into a symbol? He was just Robin of Locksley. How do we make him into Robin Hood, the story that everyone will tell?
Right. And the story they'll tell is how inept the sheriff was. Yeah. And how Robin Hood got the best of him at every turn. Yeah. And just think of the disintegration from inside of the ego. Yeah. Constantly telling everyone I won, telling Prince John, I won. I beat him. And Prince John being like, I don't think you did. Like,
that's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I was just out in the forest and I think I saw him.
Yeah, that's right. We can even have it be that there is supposedly Robin Hood is still out there doing stuff and Little John goes to investigate this and it's Marian who had been like taken up the mantle and essentially Robin Hood
because that's the vengeance that she sees most fit. Yeah. It's not just killing sheriff.
Can't kill a legend.
He has to steal the sheriff's thunder. And it can even get to a point where the sheriff has to finally admit that he didn't win and then she kills him.
Yeah. Yeah. I can also see it'd be interesting to do like since we're talking about Billy Shakes, to do the play within a play and bring in an Alan Adale. Like I remember what Paul's character from A Knight's Tale, like basically your bard.
Right. You're Geoffrey Chaucer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To have that in there. We need you to tell this story this way.
Yes,
and then have it be like King John's like, no, I saw the play. I know how it ends. And
right, exactly. It's like we're living it.
That's not what it was.
You were there.
You weren't here, man.
Yeah, because then, great comic relief in the King John who is oblivious to the truth. Yeah. He's taken by the story. It's like, oh, did you hear about this? It's like that did not happen.
That's right. Yeah. So the end of Act 1 is the play. Like you get to see the play.
Exactly, the play within a play. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And then everyone afterwards says, "No, I'm pretty sure that like you don't look great in this show." That's not what.
It's like, according to that, you were castrated? You were castrated? No, I wasn't castrated.
Yeah, so it's like whittling down all the stuff to make it so that this guy who's so like the sheriff who's so protected and insulated and like to wear down his support. So even his own men are like, I don't want to serve that guy.
Yeah, he's a eunuch.
Yeah. You're taking every so that's maybe that's the Marian's like, I want to put an arrow in his eye, and Little John's going, why don't we reduce him to nothing?
Right. It's like, that's not enough suffering. You got to take the one thing he has. It's like, what's that? his image of himself, his self-love.
That's right. Taking Robin was great at the start. They might have given 4, but we need to take more.
Right.
We need to take his reputation. We can't take his gold.
We can't take his life. We have to take his pride.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
There's the name of it, The Pride of Sherwood Forest.
Oh, look at that. Named it and everything. I thought that would come at the end. Wow, that is great. All right, so who else? I mean, does Will Scarlet have a part in this?
Absolutely. They all do. Friar Tuck. Because there's a trope to pull on with like the Three Amigos where they're all dressed like the Three Amigos.
Oh, yeah.
So if everyone at one point or another is Robin Hood during the course of the show, like he shows up in inexplicable places and to the point at which the sheriff thinks that he's encountering a ghost.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer volume of and then that revelation of the plan of how it came about. Because I think there is ways to mask from the audience how it's playing out. Because if you start at the Arrow, knowing you're burying Robin Hood, and it's John and Marion, and there we must have our vengeance, but then you just skip forward, and someone is reporting seeing Robin Hood in the forest, and then you're just basically it becomes a mystery.
Yeah, because we know one thing we know is Robin is dead. Like
right.
You told us at the start.
Right, and so we're watching the sheriff unravel.
Yeah.
Because it would be great to have him be at such a pinnacle of character, so smooth, so together, have everything he wants just so.
Yeah.
And then the reports of Robin Hood come in.
Right.
And he's like, no, it's an imposter. Yeah. But they keep coming in. And
so it's the gaslighting of Sheriff of Nottingham.
It's the gaslighting of Sheriff of Nottingham. I think that, so that like at the end of the act, when they do a play within a play where they talk about how Robin Hood snipped his balls off.
Yeah.
And he's like, that did not happen. It's like,
standing up.
His voice is very high.
Give me some light. His is that did not happen.
That did not happen. It's like, you are a little more soprano there.
His aim was so good.
Right. Why speak so high?
All right. So let's talk about the rom-com then of it now. So we need to, I mean, obviously it'll be dramedy at this point. I don't think there's a way to do it as a flat out like comedy, but I guess what are the obstacles then that are keeping the two of them apart?
Well, it starts at guilt. I think that's
a good thing. To me, they're attracted to each other, so we already have that. They've already consummated that essentially.
Well, yeah, I think that beat is important. Is we see in the first few times we see them together that they're obviously holding back, that there's something keeping them, so that the revelation, and I'd say that this is closing in on the play within a play, right before the break between acts, is the reveal that they had been conducting an affair.
Oh, it's in the play.
Yeah, that they can't be together because they don't deserve to be together because of the way they conducted themselves when Robin was alive. So that gives you plenty to be goofy with them in their avoidance of each other, but then it kind of hits with a really hard, the reason why they're not consummating, the reason why they're not just off in a cabin somewhere, is because they are dealing with the guilt.
Yeah.
Which makes the second act about resolving the guilt. Yeah. And that can even be like in a conversation with Will Scarlet.
Yeah.
Where Will Scarlet says he knew.
Oh, wow.
And more than that, he was happy.
Yeah.
Because he knew he could never be the friend to you that you needed and the lover to you that you needed.
Yeah.
Because he was always Robin Hood.
Right. And also he knew that he was not going to retire.
He was always on the run. He was always fighting.
Yeah.
His purpose was never to be there for you.
Yeah.
No matter how much he wanted to.
Yeah.
And that becomes like the permission for them to finally embrace each other. And so I think that arc is we're wondering why they act so weird together. And then we learn, because they feel like shit.
Yeah.
And then coming back down on the other side where it becomes more and more unbearable.
Yeah.
Maybe even to the point at which Marion's like, I'm going to Scotland. I'm leaving the country.
Yeah.
I can't see you every day and this is too much.
Yeah.
And then the revelation, however it is, maybe Friar Tuck was like, shouldn't tell you this, it was in confessional, but
Oh, that's really good. But does that still count after he's dead?
he's dead, man.
Yeah.
I'm not a good friar. So I think that the ability to reveal that not only did Robin Hood know about it, but he gave his blessing to it.
Yeah.
Kind of. And that's the classic romantic rom-com, like, how do you resolve it? You find out that it was the best for all parties.
Yeah.
Robin
So
Hood.
we have the final like denouement of the sheriff where he is humiliated. Not even she could kill him, whatever, but they've done what they wanted to do, which is destroy
the vengeance
and then
took root.
So even hundreds of years later, we're still
telling the story. Yeah.
Like, that
the
guy,
sheriff was stupid.
And then she's leaving, and then he has to sort of watch her go. And then you have that thing of like, oh, they won't be together. And then you have the Friar Tuck thing and be like, I didn't take a vow of silence. Let me tell you that.
I don't know why he confessed to me. I'm not Catholic.
Yeah, we don't really do that in our thing. But hey, so I think I'm fine to him. I'm good with God. So here you go. And then you have the running after, you have the airport scene.
The airport.
Yeah. Yes. And then you can even sort of do a Scott Pilgrim thing of, well, she's like, I'm running away. And he's like, well, can I run away with you? That sort of, it's not about stay here, stay with me. It's about, I'll go wherever you go.
Yeah. That's a beautiful ending.
Yeah. You could even shoot the arrow into the ocean and then we'll chase the arrow.
Which direction do we go?
Yeah, exactly. And then just pull back. And then that's the last shot is the two of them like together as she's like shooting the arrow off.
Yeah.
And curtain.
Yeah. Nice.
Tony's Critics' Choice.
Community Playhouse.
That's right. Touring company. The Pride of Sherwood Forest. That was beautiful. I love that. And unless you have any objections, what I'd like to do at the end is sort of release that out into the world. So I like to say, this idea is Creative Commons. We would love the attribution, but even that, so if you were inspired by this, if you liked what we did, take it, run it, write it. We might be inspired and write it ourselves, but Little John is public domain. So like it's all out there. So make your version of it and then, link it back. I want to see what you come up with for the audience. Like it is your story now. Take it and do whatever you will with it. Mr. Christopher Soucy, this has been amazing. This is so the conversation it was so fantastic. Did not go any place I wanted it to, which is what best conversations are like.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, the stories won't write themselves, so back into the world we must go. If you'd like to know more about Christopher Soucy, you can hear more of his voice on his podcast, The Most Haunted City on Earth. That, alongside my audio drama podcast, The Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society, are both available in your podcatcher of choice. Thank you for stopping by. If you're in this part of the world again, there will always be a seat for you at the table here at the Storywell. Right on, right away.